I wish I could say thank you, Hugh. But I certainly can say thank you to all of you for coming and to support our book launch on Albert's birthday, and also the birthday of Pi, is it?
Well, it's Pi Day today, yeah. We'll come to that.
I think most of you know Hugh pretty well. You probably don't know me. Very brief introduction. I'm a medical doctor by background, although I've done quite a few other things in my life. And the last 12 years, I've been an elite performance coach. It probably sounds like quite a difference, but at medical school, I was in two minds. I didn't know whether my future lay in psychiatry or in surgery, and I chose surgery, which I enjoyed. And I often wonder what would have happened if I'd gone into psychiatry. I have no idea. But what I do know is that I'm fascinated by the way that the human mind works, and I'm particularly fascinated with elite performance, with peak performance, because we all know, we've all done these incredible things on one day where our head was in a completely different place and everything seemed easy and we were wrapped by that in our bubble. But it's tantalizing because when we try and do that another day, it doesn't seem to come. And the harder we try and get into that mindset, which is peak performance, the harder we try, the less likely we are to find it. And I became interested in the collective unconscious about 3 years ago. And when I talk to my clients, I always say, trust me, I was a doctor, I am a doctor. When you look back, you'll see today is the day where you learned a lot that is going to build your future. Because we never learn anything when things go right. We learn the most important lessons of life when things go wrong, and we feel pretty bad and we see a gloomy future. But if you just think of yourselves when you've been in situations like that, I bet there's a very good chance that that's positioned you for where you are now in your lives. Certainly it's worked that way for me. Because the universe has this strange way of unfolding in front of us in ways that we didn't plan. And that's why I was a stickler. You know, I have an MBA as well as medical qualifications, and I've worked in the corporate sector at a high level. So it's a very big jump for me now to be talking about things like the universe moves in mysterious ways. And that I don't do planning anymore. I don't make spreadsheets anymore. Because I leave 95% of stuff to what shows up on the day. And it just seems to work a lot better like that. And I learned this kind of lesson in quite a hard way, I guess, about 3 years ago. I was giving a very high-level presentation to a group of influential people, and particularly, it shouldn't have put me under pressure, but it did, because there were 2 or 3 people in the audience who had given me a huge amount of support in my new career. And the last thing that I wanted to do was to let them down. And I was on in the afternoon, listening to the speech before, like Hugh, I was listening to Hugh. And in fact, funnily enough, Hugh, you started to bring back some of those feelings of how I felt that day. And the way that I felt, I got something very ambitious I wanted to deliver. And I just kept on thinking this isn't going to work. And the more I thought about it, I got myself into like this spiral that I can't remember really anything like that before. And I didn't know whether I was physically ill, and I'd throw up or something, or I got a flu or something, or whether this was just like some incredible kind of anxiety that I'd never had before. And I still don't know to this day, but I knew that I needed some help. And I'd spoken to a lady in the morning who I'd met and helped her on some event about a year or so before. And she said to me, Steve, I've got a book you just have to read. Now, in the business that I'm in, as an author and with the kind of people, self-development industry, people are always recommending books. And I really have given up pretty much reading books now because I just don't have time. Apart from this book, of course, and this book, of course. And so I listened to her politely, and she said, it's all about 3 principles. Now, I'd heard of 3 principles before, and it didn't make any sense to me then, and it didn't make any sense to me the way this lady was explaining. And but then as I was sitting here waiting to go on stage, those thoughts came back to me. And I said, well, I wonder if that might have something to do with Jung's collective unconscious, which again, I didn't know very much about at all. So I quickly Googled it, and there was like one paragraph, and it said, we're all connected basically, we're not on our own, and we can draw on that wealth of experience. So without analysing it, because I didn't have time to, I embraced it. And I thought, well, okay, I can't get on that stage the way I am now. I was on the point of going to the organiser and saying, I've got to go home, I've got to lie down or something. But then I thought, well, what if it's not about me? What if this is even a grain of truth? So I got onto that stage, and sure enough, without question, that was the best performance I've ever given. It was almost like a surreal experience. I mean, Hugh talks about, I write an innocent sentence to him, and he goes into a deep reverie and doesn't come out of his room for a month. Reverie, by the way, a person who speaks 5 languages, you'll know what that means literally. He was in a dream. And being in a dream is in an altered state of mind. And being in an altered state of mind is what some of us call hypnosis. You can wake up now, Hugh, by the way. The trance is over.
I'm trying, yeah. It's difficult when you're
And so there you are, you see. So I was able, that circumstance was forced on me. And as soon as I got home and thought about the whole thing, and I'd spoken to a couple of my respected colleagues who know about this kind of stuff, I knew there was no going back. Because I'd been working with elite performers and getting some pretty good results, professional athletes, finance people, you name it. I mean, results that I can't explain. I mean, Caroline, my wife, is sitting there. She was my first client. If things had gone wrong, I wouldn't be here now. I'd be doing something different. But she was a struggling golfer, and she may consider herself a struggling golfer now. But the big difference is that within 3 months of working with me, she scored 3 holes in 1, which is like, you can work out the statistics of that happening. And that was enough to get me invited out to the States to work with the coach of Justin Rose, who, as you know, is now the world #1 golfer. So, none of that was ever in my plan. So now, I'm always, I don't talk too much about collective unconscious, although I definitely will briefly today. But I've come up with other words for it. And the words that I'm focusing on at the moment are the concept of infinite intelligence. Infinite intelligence, 2 very big words there. You can't get a bigger word than infinite. And I'm not the only person, and Hugh, I think, would buy into that as well. We use very much the same words. And if it was just us 2 saying this to you, then you'd be quite right to be thinking, how do I get out of here quickly? And I wonder if I should call an ambulance. Because it is a bit wacky. But the things in life that seem to me the most important are wacky. I say to my clients right from the beginning, I'm not interested in anything that comes out of your conscious mind. And don't take that personally, don't be offended. But I'm not interested in my conscious mind either. My conscious mind can't explain the kind of stuff that Hugh was talking about. And now I'm more relaxed than I was before I started speaking. Because I've got into that other bit of my brain. It's the unconscious mind. That's where peak performance is. And that's the bit of the brain that I hope that I'm resonating with you. And it only needs to resonate just a little bit. But if you want to do something different with your life, and presumably better or more satisfying or anything, the chances are it ain't going to come from your conscious mind and these detailed plans. There is a role for the conscious, but it's very much overrated. If you can work more in the unconscious mind, you're going to get a lot of help from somewhere. And I'll go on to where and what that somewhere might be. But just so that you know that this is not just me and Hugh, we've got a distinguished list, far more distinguished than we've ever dreamed to be, who believe in pretty much the same thing. Because that's how I've spent the last 3 years, and I know Hugh has as well in different ways. And together we've come with a list of people who would share those ideas to some degree. I think in historical terms, the first one on the list would be Buddha. The second on the list historically would be perhaps Leonardo da Vinci. And after that, in no particular order, we've certainly got Einstein, we've certainly got Wolfgang Pauli, who we haven't mentioned, but he definitely should be in this discussion, and if I forget him, remind me afterwards. And we've got Carl Jung himself. We've got James Maxwell Clark, that he was mentioned. We have, help me out. We have Isaac Newton. And most philosophers, certainly most of the philosophers that I've studied, and whilst I'm not an expert in this area, he knows more about this than me, every religion that I have any degree of knowledge about, they always have this concept of something out there that is bigger than you. So are you roughly with me so far? So, if there is this infinite wisdom and infinite intelligence of the same things, where does it come from? Because if we can understand where does it come from, we might get some clues as to how we can use it. And one of the enduring questions that men and women ask themselves and have done throughout the ages is, where do I come from? Where am I going to? And then what's the meaning of life? Well, we don't have time to talk about the meaning of life, but that's wrapped in there somewhere. So where does this come from? It can, in the simplest terms, just like in the simplest terms, the brain is the conscious and the unconscious. It can only come from outside ourselves, which is what Hugh said that he felt. He felt something coming through him that fired off those neurons in his brain and led to him writing this book and doing many other strange things too. Strange by the definition of what most people believe an accountant to be. My view of accountants is based totally on Monty Python, so I may be a bit out of date by now. But it can come from outside you, or it can come from inside you. And this is where Freud and Jung fell out. Everybody disrespects Freud now, and for some of his views, I can certainly understand why. But what we should remember is that before Freud, there was nothing really, other than the philosophers. But there was nothing of a quasi-scientific basis to the mind, and that's what Freud's work was, particularly the effects of the unconscious. And he felt that the unconscious mind is very much inside us, and that's why everybody's different, because we all going to have different ideas and thoughts about everything. Whereas Jung came to the view over the years that in fact it's not so important what's inside our head, it's what's outside us. And that's what he called the collective unconscious. And he believed that we resonate on some level with all other people on the planet, 8 billion, and all the other people yet to be born and have already died and passed on, I guess. And I don't think we ever expanded this to animals, but I'm crazy enough, so what have I got to lose? So I thought, yes, and we can resonate with all animals as well. I don't have any pets myself, so this is all secondary knowledge. That's why I like friends who have pets, because then that's the way I can go for walks with dogs without having to clean up all the stuff and things like that, or feed them, pay for them. But those who have dogs, they reckon that they can communicate telepathically with them, and the dog knows stuff before they do. And the dog probably does, because the dog is a more skilled hypnotist than the person who owns it. Somehow this owner has been persuaded to feed, groom, pay, house, take on holiday their dog. And horses are the same. There's a relationship over the ages that people have had with horses. And I work, I haven't seen her recently, with a lady who is a dressage rider, hoping to be in the next Olympics. And she came up to me once and said, I really need some help, Steve. I said, what is it? She said, my horse can't do a single thing right. One day I know we're going to win a gold medal. The next day, I don't think we're even going to qualify. And I said, well, why are you telling me? I don't work with horses. And she said, well, I just thought you might have an idea. And I said, well, funnily enough, I do. I said, I don't know how you're going to take this, but it's got nothing to do with the horse. And she almost fainted. And she said, oh my God. I said, well, what do I mean? Why are you having this reaction? She said, you mean it's me? And I said, yeah, it can only be. The horse won't change from one day to the next, it's you. The horse is picking up on those vibrations that you give. If you're feeling tense and uptight because you know you've got a competition at the weekend, you're transmitting that to the horse. So you just got to chill, and the horse will chill. So she said, well, how do I do that? I said, blimey, you're full of questions this morning. But, I mean, one little thing straight away, you could try meditating. I mean, meditation has stood the test of ages. So there's a quick, throwaway for anybody. And it doesn't need to be very complicated. Meditation's one of the simplest things you can do. I've got over 200 videos on YouTube, and I've done at least 3 on meditation. But the simpler the better. I mean, if you're stuck, a lot of people get bored meditating. Don't just do something creative. Anything creative. Sarah, I was talking to her whole life is doing creative projects. So I'd imagine she's pretty laid back. But it doesn't matter how stressed and tense we are in our work, there's always 5, 10, 15 minutes that we can dedicate to something else. Something to get us into that state. We can't live like a zombie in the zone, as the athletes call it, all day. And we don't need to. If we can just start the day in the right frame of mind with a little bit of meditation, that's going to help. So, back to the question, where does this come from? Does it come from inside or outside? I think Freud and Jung and the others, they're all right. I mean, we don't know is the true answer. But we know a lot more than we did before 1953. Because Carl Jung presented his paper on the collective unconscious less than a mile from here, Bart's Hospital, October 1936. That paper he'd been working on for 30 years. He knew this was going to create a storm, and it did. And of course, what he didn't know, we know since 1953 and the double helix, is we know about inheritance and DNA and genes. And we know a lot about instinctive behavior. And we know that, birds don't go to flight school. They are pretty much born knowing how to fly. Well, almost. Their mother does have to throw them out of the tree and they'll flap. Some survive and some don't. But they know how to migrate, more accurate than our GPSs. And the same with salmons and eels. I mean, as Einstein would say, look to nature. If you're looking for big questions or big answers, look to nature, because you won't find them in books. And you just might find them in your own brain, if you can connect into something that Einstein considered something from outside. So suddenly the theory of the collective unconscious becomes more believable, because we know inheritance, and we know from animal studies that rats that have been trained how to go through a maze when their parents have died, even before the rat. And the rat is separated, the baby is separated from the child, from the adult rat. That child rat knows how to go through the maze the first time it's introduced. So that's instinctive behavior that it's just learnt in one generation. And there are countless examples like that. So it could be deep in the unconscious mind, where we know that's where our instincts and our emotions lie. And that's why I think it adds strength to my view that the only good stuff in life comes from the unconscious mind. And I did mention earlier that, of course, all religions have this concept, and so they definitely would think that this comes from outside, that it would come from whatever it is called God. And there's no question that millions, billions of people have a faith in a religion that guides them, is their moral compass throughout life. And that's why people say, I'm not personally religious, but people say, well, you must be anti-religion in that case. And so I'm certainly not. I'm very much for religion. I think everybody should have some kind of faith and some kind of religion. To me, it's more worrying what some people do with religion, which I don't see as being very helpful. What else can we do? Well, any gateway to the unconscious mind. Before I say that, let's just say, I've already mentioned the conscious mind is not going to help you. That is what I call ego is no ego. If we try and solve problems in our conscious mind, particularly those of a deep, deep complexity, we're never going to get the best answers. And in fact, what the ego will do, because the unconscious mind is very small compared to what lies underneath, the ego will stop. Because of its insistent shrieking, it will stop those intuitions that come from deep within. Intuition is a word that Hugh and I use a lot. Some of my most successful work was with professional poker players. I worked with some of the best players in the world, never planned to, never advertised to, it happened. And we talk a lot about intuition, and that's what makes them the best players in the world. Poker players have got great mathematical brains. They're brilliant at statistics and calculating the odds in all situations. But they know that will only get them so far. They get to a level where they will say, I knew exactly what cards that other person had. I knew it with certainty. And I'd say, how did you know? I can't tell you. I just know. And it's the same thing with other peak performers. I've worked with golfers on the European Tour. Whenever they have a great round of golf, I want to get to them as soon as I can, before anybody else gets to them. And my question is always pretty much the same. What did you do different today? And the response is always pretty much the same. They look vague. I don't know. What? You must know. Well, do you want me to help you? Yeah. How did you feel this morning? Normal. Oh, okay. Can you think of anything else then? Well, I suppose if I had to say anything, I think I got out of my own way. I just let go of some stuff. You know, you remember I missed that putt on the second green? Normally I'd have thrown my club, but I thought, it happens, you know. If that's the only short putt I missed today, then it'll be okay. I can live with that. And of course, just having that mindset makes a big difference, because I've seen this. I watch the players. And if they struggle for the first 6 holes, they're playing pretty well, but the birdies are just not coming. I know this is going to go 2 ways. They're either going to throw their dummy out of the pram and have a fit, is he fit? Or else they're just going to let go, get out of the way, and say, maybe this is one of these days when the putts are not going to drop. If they get angry, you can see big cricket scores being posted. If they will just accept that, you know, they've been dealt a few bad cards, chances are they're going to find that place, the zone, and they'll start playing well. So they'll be doing it without thinking about it. So I don't know how much any of this has answered, has addressed the book. I think quite a lot. But as I always say to my clients, I prefer to hear other people talk, strangely enough, than myself. And definitely the best thing that I know of is questions. A good question is always worth more than a speech. So that's why we do have time. If you have questions to you or me or both of us, then we'll be able to touch on subjects that aren't in this book, because our thoughts have moved on. Our thoughts move on all the time. The book is out of date as soon as it's published. That doesn't mean that's not a good book, but it's just that our thoughts get, probably some would say, wackier and wackier, but our clients get more and more successful, so we don't really care too much about that. You?
Very good. Well, I guess we should, slightly conscious time, probably should wrap up a little bit. If you want to buy a book, obviously, you're very welcome to buy a book. You can sign them. I was just going to mention just one other thing, because today is Pi Day, and so I'd already actually published earlier in the year this book, The Book of Pi. It looks like a book, actually it's not really a book, because the appendix to this book is the official world record for memorising Pi, which is no fewer than 70,000 decimal places, which is I thought it was quite interesting just to lay it all out and see what some chap has actually remembered. So anyway, Book of Pi is also out today. I haven't actually got any copies for sale, but just to let you know, this is Pi Day, and it's an interesting book. It's actually in a way connected, because it's actually a book about the human brain. What it basically says is that the capacity of the brain we don't fully understand now, but we know it's very significant. People keep doing more and more amazing things with their brains. So it's a similar kind of message. We shouldn't give it over to the robots. Anyway, with that I shall. Oh, Peter's got a question.
One observation, one question. You know, listening to you, actually, I was just thinking about this phrase, you know, it's bigger than us. And I'm sort of just listening to talk about religion and thinking there's something bigger out there. And sort of what I'm taking away is the bigger than us is everyone who has ever lived and will ever live. And you can see that could be quite a religious concept. My question is a Darwinian one, really fascinated by a couple of things. One, your list of people who really captured this unconscious, the power of the unconscious, included no politicians. And you'll get nothing beneficial from the consciousness. But the Darwinian point is, we develop because we identify competitive strengths, and those are retained, and the less competitive die off very, very crudely. So if we have this all-powerful or sort of much more powerful unconscious element, it seems that the human being has, the model 2019, is not quite as efficient as it should be. We've developed a mechanism to tone down the powerful unconscious and let the less efficient conscious take over. And that's quite interesting. Another thought that sort of as I've sat here, somebody who lived before or will live popped into my brain because it's far too deep for something I would think of naturally. Human knows because he works in the lives. But anyway, that's an observation really just about.
And I thank you for that. And this is what Carl Jung would call a synchronicity, because he coined the phrase synchronicity, and the book that I wrote before this one was about luck. Get Lucky Now, 7 Secrets. Because, funnily enough, the scientist that I most admire from my background is Darwin. And stranger still, amongst the list of things that I do, I am a professional actor, and I do occasionally get parts, even though I don't get auditions. And the best part I ever played was Charles Darwin in a TV series, documentary. And the thing for me that was absolutely stunning was that I was being paid for doing stuff I loved, like working with animals and things like that. And I had a close encounter with a dragon lizard. And we were supposed to be, well, the theory was we were on the Galapagos Islands. Unfortunately, the reality was we were somewhere on the south coast in the freezing cold bay in the sand dunes, and I was just wearing my tropical gear. And that was when I had to work with Annie, the dragon lizard, and there were 2 zookeepers there. And they said, "Are you the actor?" And I was dressed like Charles Darwin, so I'm like, "Yes." They said, "Right, we have to see whether Annie will work with you." And I said, "Well, I was told it was all organised." They said, "No, they shouldn't have told you that. We have to find out whether Annie likes you." I said, "Well, how do we do that?" "Come with us." And so they took me to this van. There's this big cage with Annie in there, resplendent with teeth and claws, looking very fierce. And so they said, "Right, what you have to do now is to see if she'll like you." I said, "Yeah, okay. How do I do that?" "Well, you have to stroke her on her cheek, and if she closes her eye, she likes you." And I said, what if she doesn't like me?" "That's why there's 2 of us." So I said, "Do we have to get her out of the cage?" She said, "No, there's no little hatch and you can put your hand in." So I'm stroking Annie, sweating, and Annie closes her eye. "She likes you." So we filmed with Annie, and she was wonderful. And I was lying on the floor with Annie right there, and I was pretending to do pictures. And the director was saying, "You have to get closer, closer, closer." And I kept inching closer, closer. And he finally said, "Closer." I said, "Look, what do you want me to do? Put my head inside the mouth?" He said, No. Just be more serious." So, there we are. That's Darwin. Sorry for that. And your question was, it was a very good one, because we are bypassing the laws of evolution by our modern society focusing on the conscious mind. And you are right on the money with that. There has never been a time in history when our conscious mind has been so swamped and overwhelmed. I mean, you're a good example, sir, and we're all the same. You've got your iPhone in your hand, and you're probably thinking, "Can I quickly see who's been messaging me?" and all the rest of it. Well, you go into the schools and see how the kids are. I'm really worried about this. Because if we lose the power of the unconscious mind or the connection, we are in big, big trouble. And we've got artificial intelligence looming on the horizon, which of course is a huge subject. And I think we're going to go through the next revolution in our history, and I don't know that it's going to be a good one. But I mean, there are some positive signs. There's going to be more and more people who are cluing into the kind of stuff that we talk about. And certainly more people practice meditation and mindfulness and stuff like that than ever before. These programs are being rolled out in schools and hospitals and prisons and all the rest of it. But is it enough? At the moment, I think it's a battle we're losing. So that's a pretty deep question you asked me.
Yeah, so it's good. What I take away is conditioning, because we had this chat when I did Latin A level and sort of just reading about the Senate speeches that went for 5 hours, even reading a Shakespeare play. and looking how many people these days gives a speech that goes more than 3 paragraphs rather than have the.
Yeah.
So it's not that the body has evolved in a way, it's conditioning, it's external conditioning has forced us into that sort of dependency on the consciousness and maybe closing our minds to the unconscious part.
I've got a very powerful example here. The famous Martin Luther King speech, the Gettysburg Address, I think it was. If you look at that speech in your entirety, the chances are, and you didn't know what it was going to lead to, you would switch it off. It is the most boring speech I've ever heard. Because there's this guy behind a lectern reading from a script with a very wooden, leaden voice. It is really boring. And then something happens. In the language we're talking about, something shot through his brain, or something liberating. And you saw him put down the speech, and you could imagine him ripping it up. And he started talking, and his hands started moving. And before you knew it, it's the most famous speech probably in history for a very, very good reason. And that's called hypnotism. We won't go into hypnotism today. But there are different ways that people can do that when they're speaking. You want to know see a good example of the opposite effect? Watch Hitler's speeches with the volume turned down. That guy knew how to communicate. Shame that he chose the wrong subjects. But anyway, so there you are. Really impressed you. Thank you. Sorry?
I like the word psychotic. The sweet spot.
So you want me to mention psychotic?
Yeah, I think I should.
Okay, well thank you, that's Caroline for the reminder. My book is called The Psychotic Revolution, and as far as I'm aware, I'm the first person that used the word psychotic, certainly in a book title. And the whole point is really talking about some of the things that you mentioned about very much about human evolution and the evolution of the brain. And what came to me as a huge surprise, the last skill that we learned was the power of talk. And that was only about probably 30,000 or 50,000 years ago, which in evolution is nothing, absolutely nothing. So before then, we couldn't talk, and yet we still were the dominant species on this planet. So that meant we could communicate. We may not have been talking, because we didn't have the voice box and stuff, but we were communicating, and that could only be through some of the things that we've been talking. So we were psychic, that's the word that I use, psychic, knowing stuff without knowing how and why. And we've become, because of our reliance on social media, on the imprecision and ambiguity of speech, we all now live in a very deluded world. Our view of the world is very deluded. Everything we think is deluded, because as soon as you have a thought and put words to it, the beauty and purity of the thought has been diminished quite dramatically. So instead of being psychic, we are now psychotic. We are psychotic because we are living in a deluded world, and psychosis is an arc. At one extreme, we have the schizophrenia, the bipolars, and all that kind of stuff. And on the other extreme, we have what would be considered normal for today. But if we can connect to some of that psychic or historical, what Freud called archaic remnants, if we can connect more to that, there is a sweet spot in the middle. That's the psychotic place, and that's where peak performance lives. I could have equally called that, infinite intelligence or whatever. But that is definitely where performance comes from, and it should be our default state. Often we don't really need to do anything new, we just need to reset everything and go back to how we were. Although that's of course much easier said than done.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. Good luck to your son.
Thank you all.
Thank you.